All right, we're live. Welcome back, my friends. Y'all are ready? You are here, and the chat is already filling up. Oh my goodness. I love it. We are already bringing questions. You're amazing. We're going to get Jon in here and hear from him. So, Jon, I see you. I'm going to send you an invite. And I am so excited to be here. Hello. This is fantastic. Janice says, yes, you can pause on YouTube and you'll be able to pull it back up. It is, at this point, it is just a regular YouTube video. And so you can rewind. Hello and welcome, Jon. So glad you're here.
Hey, how's it going? Happy to be here.
So glad you're here. All right, and lots of others so excited to be here. And we already have the chat filling up with questions, so y'all bring those questions in there. And Jon, I have a doc in front of me with all the questions, so I will keep track of those. You don't have to pay attention to the chat if you don't want to. And we're just going to get through as many as we can.
Okay, that sounds awesome.
All
Happy
right.
everybody's in here. Looks like quite a few people joining. It's nice to see.
Yeah, I know the end of the day gets hard when all the things start to, kids have needs and and work is calling, but we've got a really good turnout so far. We're going to jump right in if you're ready for it. And we're just excited to learn from you.
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So we have a question kicking us off from Devin. And she says, any advice on trusting others to do it the way you want it when you're not there? I always think it would be a nightmare to work for. I think I would be a nightmare to work for as the actual boss, since I have my systems the way I want them. It's a challenge I face in my full-time baking job as well, and it's not even her business.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and gets right at the heart of what I've been facing for the last decade, in the sense that when we first started working on Proof 9 years ago, it was primarily me in a garage, and now we have around 100 people on the team, and every year we've sort of added to that amount, and it's true. You know, I have a certain vision in my head for what I'm hoping for Proof, and I'm also often thinking, you know, way ahead in the future, but then the way in which every other person involved thinks about their day-to-day, the next week, the next month, the next quarter, can have a huge impact on the overall outcomes. I think the root of your question, though, is, well, if you want things a certain way and people do them the other, or do them in a different way, definitely starts with taking what's in your head and writing it down. As hard as that can be amidst all of the chaos of day-to-day operation, writing down an actual vision, writing down an actual purpose, writing down an actual set of values, writing down more of the logic of how you do things, where you order from, essentially like building a structure for things that might just be floating in your brain. It's sort of easy to remember when you're just getting started, or when you're rather small still, that on Mondays you have to run this particular errand that involves like a 3-step process. But over time, all of this needs to be written down, and then it can be something that you hold people accountable to. The other half of the question, though, that wasn't really asked, that I would just sort of volunteer here, is that your vision of what needs to happen for your own brand will be challenged over time as you grow. And the best feedback comes from the people who are working right alongside you. And so the sort of more painful element of your question is confronting the reality that some things won't go as they did in your brain when you initially thought about them, or as they did for you when it was just you working on the business. And some things will inevitably have to be adjusted. But this is a good challenge in the sense that if you meet it, it will stretch you and grow you as much as it grows your organization.
Wow. Spoken like you've been through this yourself.
Yeah, I'd say many cycles of this, where it's not something that ends. It's something that is a living, breathing part of your development to sort of continually take what you have in mind and share it in a way that other people can participate and participate successfully.
Okay, incredible. All right, the next question is from Junzi, and she's wondering, you mentioned that you keep 3 starters. Can you elaborate a bit on what type and why?
Sure. Yeah. So we do keep 3 starters. I would sort of start by saying we've only kept 3 starters for the last 2 years out of 9. So for the first 7 years and the first 4 locations, we kept 1 starter. Even though we prefer making certain things out of a sweet starter. So we have our standard liquid starter, Harriet, that does most of the heavy lifting, even some of the heavy lifting on products that you wouldn't expect a standard starter to work on, like our whole sourdough croissant program. We're leavening near 10,000 croissants a week and varieties just with standard liquid sourdough starter, and it works out brilliantly. We wanted to make other even more sensitive products. One that sort of comes to mind is burger buns, where every time we've ever tried making burger buns with a standard, liquid lean starter, they're just a little heavier than we want, just a little denser than we want. We noticed that sweet starters have allowed us to achieve much softer, fluffier results in really heavily enriched doughs. So like think Ukrainian Pascha around Easter. There's more butter and fruit and sugar in that dough than I can comfortably state out loud. It barely wants to come together. And if you try to leaven that dough with just the standard sourdough starter, the taste actually is a bit almost conflicting in the tang, but also you just don't get quite as much leavening. So we found just significantly different results where we don't have to touch baker's yeast because of the sweet starter. Anything that would be sort of tempting to go towards baker's yeast, we can go towards sweet starter. And the third one that we keep is a rye starter. And it's primarily just for a rather limited rye program where it wouldn't be as appropriate to use the wheat starter.
Okay. So interesting. All right, the next question comes from Natalie. She's wondering, when you took over the bakery, you didn't have a baking background. As both a new baker and a new bakery owner, how did you know whether you were making the right decisions? What did you rely on when you didn't yet have the experience to trust your own judgment?
Well, I do think that irrespective of experience and irrespective of confidence level, trusting yourself is mandatory. You ultimately are the responsible party for your business and your choices and the risks and decisions you make. And so sort of the foundational belief in self is critical. And depending on your own sort of relationship with that dynamic, because all of us, are probably on different personal journeys when it comes to our own, self-doubt, self-confidence. I think that's an area that requires continual work and continual development. For me, that foundation was in being an athlete and also being a business owner before Proof. I was in many situations in my life prior to Proof that were higher pressure, higher stakes for the situation that I was in my life and how serious I took it. And all of those lessons sort of contributed to that initial trust, while I had no business really trusting in, my novice baking skills. Beyond that, on a day-to-day basis, it's this relationship of both compassion and drive to improve. It's being willing to look at your own work and assess it honestly, poke holes, really sort of confront your own ego, your own sort of assumptions on things. So I think it was really a lot of trial and error throughout, really, almost throughout now, because all along the way, my role has just changed. At the beginning, the trial and error was building great doughs, getting things to come out consistently, understanding time and temperature. And, each day it was just measuring for one. When I first started, when I learned some recipes from the original founder over the 2 weeks that we had to work together, I noticed that he wasn't using temperature as a measuring tool. So he didn't have a instant read thermometer. And so that was something that I invested in really quickly, and started using more, measuring the temperature of the water, measuring the temperature of the final dough, and understanding, oh, this result happened. What does that mean? And adjusting for the next week. So at the beginning, it was a lot of really close-knit feedback loops. Today, it's the same thing, except it's encouraged across a whole organization. So today, it means being open-minded enough to continue to accept criticism from numerous angles in order to still drive incremental improvement. So the way in which you can give yourself a little bit more compassion and trust is just to measure small wins over extended periods of time. You can't eat the whole elephant at once, but you can kind of go one bite at a time. And once, 2 months has passed and you can look back, you can see, wow, I actually made it quite a ways. That should translate to a bit of a confidence boost so that you have just enough to get the next rung of the road. But that journey continues and doesn't really end.
Wow. Okay. Incredible. All right. The next question comes from Ben, who's wondering, before hiring your first employee, it seems like you almost have to have too much business and overextend yourself before that first hire makes sense financially. Then once you have enough work to keep your first hire busy, then you hire. Does this sound accurate, or is there another approach we should be thinking about?
Oof. This is the sort of age-old chicken and egg problem of building a business and doing so bootstrapped, which is what I know. I know what it's like to build a business without a huge cash reserve to pull from, without outside capital to pull from. And unfortunately, that problem isn't just one that exists with your first employee. It exists with your 10th and your 20th and your 30th and your 40th, where you're constantly trying to figure out how to keep the business in a rather narrow balance. And it's all just a set of trade-off conversations. So it's making sure that you can pay for what's more vital than that first employee before you start paying for that first employee. You have to sort of decide what that is. I would recommend that perhaps you consider your own pay first. It's that age-old, like, concept on the airplane of put your own oxygen mask on before you try to put on your neighbors. And the reason being is if you neglect that from the get-go, then later on down the road, you actually seed that in as an expectation in your organization that that there's constantly this sort of sacrificial layer. We've done that in numerous ways in our organization, even non-monetary, and you sort of have to go back and deal with them. But the truth is, for us, we did have an outside source of capital for the first few hires. We lost our original auction grade oven like 8-9 months in, and we were a bakery without an oven. We didn't have the ability to afford a new one. My wife, Amanda, who also was a speaker and did a Q&A, you guys might have heard from her. She owned a condo from before we were married. And we actually sold it at that time when we lost our oven. And so the proceeds were around $100,000. 20 went to buying the oven, 20 went to powering the oven in our home garage, and 60 went to paying our staff for the whole year 2018. That was just what the business needed in order to have the 3 or 4 helping hands that we had at the time. And it wasn't until January of 2019 that the business could pay for those original staff members on its own. So, I mean, in answer to your question, we actually hired before we could afford it. And where you land on that spectrum is really a hard decision. You might land on one side or the other at different stages as you develop, but it is a chicken and egg problem.
Yeah. No easy answer. That's helpful to hear that, though. All right, the next question comes from Adam. He says, when forecasting a business production schedule, how do you prevent the bakery from selling out a product versus making a little too much product?
You guys are going on all of the best questions. This is another multi-year effort of getting better at this particular forecasting method. I mean, for us, we're so worried about this dynamic because our success seems to lie in the thinnest of margins. It's strange, you know, when we were in the garage hand mixing dough, sort of daydreaming of what a future might look like, did not daydream about all of the thin margin realities of a larger scale bakery and how, you know, a walk-in will go out and you need to have $10,000 for that. And then the following week, you know, a truck will go out, you need to have another $10,000 for that. I mean, I wish I was exaggerating, but, you know, it's when you're small, the repair bills are rather small, the labor bills are rather small, but to you, they feel large at that time. And those things sort of scale as you go. And planning production just right is the difference between sort of having a reserve and being able to keep going sustainably, or just slowly but surely eroding at your ability to, you know, stay whole financially. I think that it is important to slightly overshoot on production planning. So if you're open for business in a farmer's market setting or in a retail setting, you know, you don't want to produce less than your demand, because then you have no opportunity to sort of capture the upside. And you really want to give your marketing efforts something to do. The reason we are online talking about, you know, our offerings with our community, writing emails, you know, making videos, doing these kinds of things is to attract more and more people to our brands, to try our products, our baked goods. And so you want to have a little bit of a buffer, but we try to keep that to just a few percentage points. We also try to be creative with things that we can upcycle. So certain products can be turned into something else. For instance, if you are in a setting where you can make something like twice baked croissant, they're delicious and they require a regular once baked croissant to make. And so that implies, you can take a croissant after, you weren't able to sell it and turn it into something else that actually has a higher ticket value and you can recover from. The other big element to your question, though, is how taking orders in advance conflicts with preparing for orders that you expect organically from kind of live traffic at, say, a farmer's market or a retail location, where if you take orders from in advance, they sort of take priority to your regular, walk-in customer. And so it's also important to segment that in a way to where you're not sort of shooting yourself in the foot by taking orders in advance that are just sort of robbing from people that would otherwise come to see you. All this said, wrapping all of this up, for the last 2.5 years, I have been working with a small group to build production management software for artisan bakers. We expect to release it in the next 12 months, sometime for other people to jump onto. We're using a prototype version of it right now, which helps us meet this exact set of problems. There's so much information to plan around, and getting it just right is the difference between, success and failure sometimes. And this is not an easy question to answer, but something that we've been working towards for years to be better at.
Okay. I'm dealing with that too in my new storefront. It's so hard. Vanessa's question is, I would love to know about if you guys worked with getting investors to open your brick and mortar and how that worked, if so.
Another wonderful question. Opening a brick and mortar is such an amazing experience, although it's probably one of the more risky moments in somebody's business development trajectory. It sort of gets worse as you open more than one, where the second one could compromise the first, and so on and so forth. Here's the sort of root of the problem. Typically, when you're opening a brick and mortar, you're moving into somebody else's building. And in order to secure the money up front to build this thing, you have to invest in somebody else's building, typically. If that is you, then here's the struggle. The asset that sort of underpins all of the money you're pouring in as an investment is the building itself, which is not yours or your business's. It's a landlord's. And so getting capital to invest in somebody else's building is not easy capital to get. We got some of that in the form of kind of unsecured community-based debt. That program that we actually participated in, the company was like a startup and they went belly up. So now we actually sort of have to manage what is around 550 individuals that gave us rather small amounts of money as we repay them through 2029 for our main production locations. That worked, but we sort of faced the trade-off of that, where the business in between that was managing those relationships and doing a lot of the logistics disappeared, and we still had contractual obligations to those people. We didn't actually sell any percentage of proof at any time. We flirted with it numerous times and have even gotten very close. And we sort of just determined at all stages that the amount that we would have to give up for what we get in return, which is often trying to overcome a rather short-term problem or a one-time expense, just hasn't been worth it for us to sort of share in visioning and start to sort of have different interests. Because for us, proof is not, just about money. I think, money is somewhere down the list. It's a necessary part of the whole thing. Of course, it's kind of the oxygen by which we function in our economy. But there's far easier ways to make money than making bread. And so our worry always has been, if we bring other people in, that we might sort of lose the alignment that makes proof rather special, because there's dozens of things that we do because we care deeply, not because they make the most financial sense. And so somebody that's coming in that only cares about the return on investment might look at our flour mill and say, it's cheaper just to go buy flour. And to us, that sort of erosion risk is not worth it long term. I'll sort of land this with a different alternative that we're exploring for our future. If you're building a brick and mortar in a building that is possible to buy, there's a wonderful SBA program, I think it's called SBA 504, where you only have to put 10% down to purchase the building. A hypothetical that we're exploring in the future is doing something like that with a group of people if we want to open another location, where we basically form a company that just owns that location in and of itself, and then we can finance the build out and have the location be the collateral or the backing for the build out. So it's an interesting hybrid approach where we could potentially take investors to own a piece of real estate that Proof then rents from, but those investors wouldn't necessarily have any ownership interest in Proof itself. So that, from the little bit of work I've done over the last year to explore that, is what we think we'll use as a vehicle if we wish to build any other locations in the future.
Wow, that is fascinating. Okay, so interesting. All right, the next question is from Lynette. She's wondering, she says she's been watching you since day one and have learned so much. She's wondering, do you use all active starter, or do you also use the discard? And do you share your croissant recipe?
So we don't really use discard. We don't have a lot of it, to be honest. I think it is super helpful for us that we now produce 7 days a week. And we feed our sourdough starters twice a day. So there's just kind of a natural rhythm that just keeps going. And as a result, we can sort of predict the feedings to be just basically on the money. We keep a little bit of reserve starter all the time as a backup. So, some of that ends up going to, going as waste. Certainly, I think discard has a lot of great potential. I just haven't really figured out how to weave it in. And also, I'm a bit obsessive on not crossing the line of building hybrid sourdough and yeasted, combination doughs. I really want our customers to be able to trust our bakery is truly all long fermented sourdough, so that they can sort of benefit from the digestive benefits of long fermented sourdough. So while it would be really easy to add discard to say, we have exactly one thing we make that's not sourdough, it's chocolate chip cookies that have their own story and history that date back to my daughter selling them with me at farmers markets, early on. But we won't add discard to the cookies, even though it would arguably make them better, just because we don't want people to confuse discard and baking soda, baking powder hybrid to be the same thing as a sourdough formula. So as a result, we're sort of limited there, more so than maybe you need to be.
Okay, so good. All right, next question comes from Tanisha. She says, if you had to start over, or if you could change anything you did in the past, is there anything you would do differently, such as not doing a brick and mortar, going directly to warehouse wholesale or more markets, etc.?
Yeah. It's always easy to say hindsight is 2020, and I don't think any of us would look backwards and be able to say there's nothing we regret, or nothing that we wouldn't change. Um, I do think things happen the way they do for a reason. When I look at sort of the most challenging moments at Proof, they also tend to be the moments of the most immense personal and team growth. The moments that you would sort of want to have not happened end up happening, and end up pushing you forward beyond where you thought you would get otherwise. One that comes to mind, it was like September of 2020. We were in the thick of the global pandemic. We had launched our YouTube channel maybe 5 months earlier. By that point, we had had a pesky neighbor that had been calling the city on our garage bakery for 2 years straight. And now they had the evidence of the YouTube channel to prove that indeed we were violating a zoning ordinance by having non-resident employees in our garage. That was our big, our big sin, our big, offense against our community, that, we had a few people working out of our garage, out of our residential district. And prior to our YouTube channel, it wasn't so easy for anybody to prove that. The neighbor was upset that there was a few vehicles parked in my driveway and at the curbside by my house. But what was the city going to do? Pull a search warrant to prove that these weren't guests and they were instead employees. But now I had the YouTube channel, and it was getting viewed by literally hundreds of thousands of people. The third video we put out, I had long hair. I don't know what it was. It just happened to be the right timing, right at the beginning of the pandemic. Everybody was baking sourdough. I think it was because I had long hair that, a lot of people tuned into that one. But all of a sudden, our opportunity horizon changed because of YouTube. And the cost of that was I got a knock on the door from the vice mayor of my city just a few months later saying, you have exactly 4 months to vacate this garage or we're going to shut you down. And so I guess, looking backwards, if I have any regrets, it would be about the sort of imposed pace that we needed to grow from that moment onward, because we had reached a pretty nice plateau, if you will, where we had our garage space pretty well optimized. It was almost 2,000 square feet. We felt comfortable in there. We were doing all kinds of farmers markets. We were highly profitable out of there. And we could have held the line and raised more cash and gone slower and had an easier time with a lot less survival-like months thereafter. But things went differently. And the way things went, I think, was meant to be. Here we are. It's been 5 years since that point. There's been a lot of growth. There's a lot of growth ahead, a lot of opportunities. I don't think I have any true regrets. I do think that I could see easier paths towards the same outcome that are over longer periods of time, mostly.
Okay, interesting. All right. Genesis is wondering, what is your go-to for self-care in order to not get burned out or to keep the momentum up with running a bakery? You go to music, vacation, playing sports, hobbies.
Yeah. It's so easy to just get stuck in your personal work cave. For us, it was definitely that garage. We just lived there. I remember when we first started in 2017, I was still doing my previous business. Had nothing to do with baking. It was like a travel-based business, computer work, that kind of thing. And I told Amanda, I was like, yeah, I think I can get this baking thing done in 5 hours a day. And it's just going to be from 5 to 9 every day. And then all of a sudden, we're no longer working other jobs and were in the garage seemingly 20 hours a day. And, you know, our business is so weekend based and holiday based that every sort of family gathering starts to be a struggle to attend. And, you know, every time like our kids' birthdays come up, we're scrambling to plan because, you know, so we lived this, and we lived sort of the imbalance of this. Then my mom passed away in 2022 after a 25-year battle with cancer. And I was by her side for her last 2 weeks, you know, at her bedside in Poland. And I came back already having, you know, our brick and mortar bakery in Mesa. We were already sort of planning number 2 because we were running out of space for flour. And so I remember thinking, if I don't start pouring back into my own cup some other fuel that has nothing to do with the business, then there's no chance that I'll be able to lead this team into the future. And so I picked up a tennis racket again after having taken 10 years off from the sport that I grew up playing. And invested time that I didn't think I had. And I think that's actually a key insight from that period, where if you do invest the time in self-care, oddly, you end up with more capacity than you, even if you think you're maxed out. And there's no chance that you could, you know, offer yourself the hour a day or 2 hours a day even to, you know, do what you need to do in order to stay healthy and not burn out and have something else fueling you. Interestingly, that investment leads to more capacity. You'll spend less time, you know, ineffective in decision making. You'll get things done more efficiently. It's been a huge, important part of the last 4 years for me. I have now picked up other hobbies. I also played guitar growing up, and now I play daily again. And that's a different form of restoration. So I think it's really important.
Okay. So just make the time, even if you don't feel like you have it. Okay. Claire's question is, how do you balance making extra for a farm stand? So if usually farm stand models, like you drive up and pick it up, when it's your first time and not knowing if anyone will even show. She doesn't want to lose a bunch of money.
Yeah. It's so devastating, the idea of staying up late into the night or getting up early in the morning, putting so much effort into baking things by hand, and then the idea that no one would come to buy them, or that you know, leave with a bunch of product. I think there's two things to that. One, the sort of marketing energy that is required before you ever go to an event, whether it be a farm stand, whether it be a farmer's market, whether it be just opening up your porch to people, is necessary. It's not just about making good product. It's about sharing your vision for why you're doing what you're doing with the world. And you know, of course, your best form of marketing is word of mouth. It's people that have tried your product and, you know, will start telling other people that they know about it, which means that if you do spend the time to make it, even if you're not going to make money, that product is super valuable. And so I think that you should approach that risk with, I am going to find a home for every single one of these things that I made, whether paid or unpaid. Because if unpaid, then at least somebody will have gotten fed, and at least I will have an opportunity freely to share what I do. And to be honest, I have yet to be rejected when handing out free bread and pastries to people. It's a wonderful way to sort of break the ice, even in the most random situation. Walk into a restaurant and share bread with a crew member, you know, a kitchen crew. We did that pretty much every time we opened a location the last couple of years. we try to make it a habit to use our leftovers as marketing. And that hopefully kind of helps overcome some of that risk. You have to know, like, I don't know, it's like karma. If you put it out in a good and authentic way, it will come back to you. But oftentimes we have to put out a lot more than we expect up front before it sort of comes back.
Okay, what amazing reframe. I love that. All right, next question, and probably one of the last questions, is from Anastasia. She says, why did you decide to mill your own flour? Were there no local millers around you, or was it because you wanted to bake from scratch process even deeper?
Yeah. So this is a deep one in the sense that it wasn't just like one moment in time where it's like, okay, we're going to mill our own flour. There's a series of sort of small problems that sort of built up over time that led to finally making that decision. We do have other local mills, and grateful that there's others around that are trying to revive this idea of traditional stone milling. I think it's a technology that is so much more rooted in our human history, going back 14,000 years, than industrial steel mills. I mean, if you think about, like, the average woman in ancient Egypt was baking bread daily and milling flour over a stone, by hand. It's possible to do. It's not easy, but it's possible to do. Whereas, to assemble a steel roller mill requires some, like, industrial scale. So there's something beautiful about just getting connected to the core processes in what we do. And I think that's the root of it for me, is curiosity. I took over this bakery in 2017. It was a garage operation, one person working. That person was working 7 days a week. That person was buying ingredients at the restaurant supply store. And that was my first sort of moment of awareness. Is I had been buying this bread for a couple of years, and to me as a customer, it was this hand mixed product made by this almost medieval style artisan baker in my community. But then I start baking it, and I realize, I'm buying General Mills flour as the staple ingredient. And, what a weird counter narrative that, I'm using the same base ingredient that's going into the big box cereal that my kid's eating. And it's not that it was bad flour, but it started this deeper conversation of, oh, well, can I trace this flour to the field? Is this wheat being sprayed with anything? Customers started asking. And now all of a sudden I'm confronting customers at the market, so proud of this beautiful bread that we've made, and yet they have objections over the core ingredients. And I don't feel that great about that. So then we started buying from a local mill. And it's interesting, the local mill could get us heritage grains, but as a budding bakery that wanted to be a commercial bakery one day, yeah, I would say, kind of the upper limit on what you can buy flour for is in the like $1 to $1.30 range per pound. I mean, if you're much higher, then your prices are really going to have to lift off beyond what a lot of people are maybe willing to spend. At least that was my impression back then. And was interesting to get that price point from the local mill. They had to cut the heritage grains that they were selling us with 70% industrial steel roller mill flour. So now I'm back at the same problem again, that I have heritage grains that are grown locally. I can tell that story, but when a customer comes up to me at the market stand and asks, well, so is any of this wheat sprayed with glyphosate? I can't look them in the face and say no, because I know that wheat came out of a grain elevator and that maybe some of it was sprayed with glyphosate, and I would have no way of knowing. Then you get into geopolitical shocks of the last 5 years, where you have two major wheat producers in the world at war with one another. And all of a sudden, not really certain what that's going to do. For me, part of building proof is feeling like I'm doing something that I can do, that I can contribute to. But I'm only as good as my supply chain. If I don't have flour, then my hands no longer can make the bread. And so at some point, we decided that if we're going to build a larger bakery, which is kind of the trajectory we put ourselves on, then we're going to do things that we couldn't do when we were a garage bakery. Because otherwise, why did we do all of this growth in the first place? It's a lot easier to manage less people, manage less locations. And trust me, you don't make the exponential more profit just because you're bigger. Just going back to like more money, more problems, that saying. So the way in which I justify our growth to myself, the way in which I can continue to do what we're doing and build jobs that are better for our teammates, build opportunities that are better for our community, is do things that we weren't capable of doing as a garage bakery. One of those things is milling our own flour, growing that locally with farmers, being able to sign contracts with local farmers that quite literally save local family farms, and being able to sort of make a dent at building better food sovereignty in our local economy.
It's powerful. Okay, Laura said, very thoughtful answers to these questions. It's clear that every decision you've made has been incredibly intentional and well thought out. And I think it's so interesting to hear the inside, the story behind why you've made those decisions. Okay, how about one final question? Karen says, can you summarize the biggest things to consider when considering the move from a small home bakery to renting a storefront space?
Yeah. Don't get the build out financing wrong. If you're not rock solid on that, if you feel like you're making some sort of a shady debt deal with somebody to get it done, just wait. It's probably not the right moment. Getting the financing wrong is the quickest way to sort of seeing all your hard work up until that point get eroded really quickly. I can't tell you how many brick and mortar businesses in the food world I've seen close in the time that we've been operating. So just be really careful on the financing aspects of things. Don't underestimate all of the little expenses. There's so many things that are easy to take for granted when your setup is right in your home. For instance, just throwing a random obscure one out there that might be worth researching: backflow preventers for every single piece of equipment that has a water source, like a steam injected oven. Random devices that require a special licensed plumber to install and sometimes require annual paid inspections. Nothing astronomical, but in a build out might add a couple $1,000s of unexpected costs and a couple $100 of annual inspection costs. And I wish I could say like that's the only weird thing like that exists out there that you might not be considering coming out of a home setting. And so the other thing I would say is try your hardest to find locations that already had a food business inside of them. I didn't learn this until location 3, and I wish I would have known this in location 1. It could have saved me hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. Because you can sometimes open up a location that was already a food business for, say, tens of thousands, whereas if it was a dry cleaners, like our second location was, that was hundreds of thousands of dollars invested to build out what we have there. So that second gen concept's important. Making sure you've allocated all the financial planning accurately is really the meat of this, because it's very easy to underestimate the costs of operating commercially. I'd focus there.
Okay. Wow, that's so good. Okay, there's a handful that we haven't gotten to. Jon, I'm going to send you the transcript after this. I'll send it to Sophia, and the recording. So you can read through the kind words too. There's a lot of kind words thanking you for your time in here. This has been amazing. You are a wealth of knowledge, and we are so honored to have learned from you and appreciate your time so much.
Yeah, thank you for putting this on, Caroline. It's really an honor to be a part of it. And I think I'm so optimistic about this movement in the world and how meaningful it is. It's a movement that actually could change the world for the better. I think it already is. One where we're taking more of our food choices into our own hands and the hands of our individual communities. You all are a part of that movement. And I just encourage you all to keep building that dream.
Yeah. What a good note to end on. Amazing. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up. I'm going to jump live solo again real quick, just a final wrap up for the summit, because this is the note that we're ending on and not a better note that I could have asked for. So thank you so much. We're going to close out and I'll be back right online in just a second. All right.
Thank you.